The hidden reason Earth never brings its military. Zorax's primary eye narrowed, the vertical pupil contracting with suspicion. Tell me, Ambassador, are you truly surprised? Earth has never once sent a single military representative to any summit. Not one. It's a blatant breach of tradition, and an insult. One of his thick, armored tentacles slammed onto the floating desk, sending several holographic documents spinning through the air. Every other Concord species brings their highest-ranking defense officials. It's protocol. It's expected. Plex, his chief aide, tilted her head and replied with diplomatic calm. Perhaps they prefer civilian diplomacy. Nonsense, Zorax snapped. They're hiding something. He brought up a glowing list of the upcoming Earth delegation, projecting it into the air. Ambassador Tia Jackson. 3 civilian aides. 2 cultural attaches. A xenobiologist. And, his mandibles clicked in disbelief, a catering consultant. Plex leaned closer. I believe that's someone who ensures food is safe for interspecies consumption. That's just it, Zorax said, his tone hard. They always bring random specialists, but never military. The Vraxian Empire sends its War Supreme. The Zetulian Confederation brings its entire defense council. Even the pacifistic Lumrians send a token security officer. But humans? Nothing. He began pacing, 6 chitin-plated legs clicking sharply against the polished floor. This isn't some quaint cultural quirk, Plex. I can feel it in my spiracles. Perhaps they have no military, Plex offered. Zorax barked a laugh. Don't be absurd. We've tracked their orbital defenses, intercepted their weapons tests. Primitive by galactic standards, yes, but functional. So the question is... His voice lowered. What are they hiding? 3 days later. Zorax stood in a secure communications chamber, the walls humming with electromagnetic dampeners. No signal, physical or electronic, could leave this room. The holographic feed flickered to life, revealing the shifting, translucent mass of Krell, one of the Concord's most discreet intelligence operatives. Their gelatinous form pulsed with shifting bioluminescent patterns, the alien equivalent of facial expressions. This is unexpected, Krell's translation unit intoned flatly. I need information, Zorax said. Discreetly. Krell rippled. Information is my currency. Name your request. Earth. I want to know why they've never brought a military representative to any summit. Krell stilled for a moment, then shifted in what might have been amusement. That's why you called me? To ask about human diplomatic preferences? It's not preference, Zorax growled. It's deliberate. 6 summits in 18 standard years, 0 military officials. Everyone else follows the same protocol. Only the humans refuse. Have you considered asking them? Krell suggested dryly. I have. Ambassador Jackson smiles that infuriating human smile and says something about civilian oversight and democratic traditions. Empty words. Krell's bioluminescence dimmed as they considered. You may have a point. The pattern is unusual. Very well. I'll look into it. Quietly. 1 week later. Zorax was reviewing summit preparations in his private quarters when his security system blared an emergency override. Accept, he ordered. Krell appeared, but their bioluminescence was flashing in rapid, erratic bursts Zorax had never seen before. Stop, Krell said without preamble. Stop what? Your investigation into Earth's military. Drop it immediately. Zorax's mandibles twitched. Why? What did you find? Nothing, Krell replied. And that's the problem. I don't understand. I accessed everything, public records, Concord intelligence files, intercepted transmissions. They have a standard military, Army, Navy, something called Marines, Air Force, Space Force. All of it ordinary. Nothing remarkable. Then why the urgency? Krell's form compressed in what Zorax finally recognized as fear. Because someone is investigating me. 3 of my secure data nodes were breached. 2 of my field agents vanished. And my lead research assistant was found, rearranged. Zorax's central pupil constricted. Rearranged? Molecularly, Krell said grimly. Still alive, but their memory proteins have been scrambled. They can't recall anything about the investigation. Are you implying Earth? I'm not implying. Krell cut in. I'm warning you. Stop. This conversation is already too long. Forget about the humans, Ambassador. For both our sakes. The connection severed abruptly. Zorax stood in silence for several moments. Finally, he said, Computer, delete all records of this communication, and any references to my inquiry into Earth's military. Confirmed. The computer replied. He exhaled slowly through his spiracles. Perhaps it is better to let this matter drop. Then his mandibles twitched into a slow, deliberate smile. Absolutely not. The investigation begins. The next morning, Ambassador Zorax paced his office with quick, agitated strides. I will not be intimidated, he declared, mandibles clicking sharply. Flix, his aide, lingered in the doorway, antennae twitching. Ambassador, if Agent Krell advises caution, it's one thing. But Krell advised fear. That's different. Exactly, Zorax replied, gesturing emphatically with his upper limbs. Something is happening, Flix. Something important. And I know I'm right, because now Krell is being watched. Which means, if there was nothing to hide, Zorax said, why the surveillance? Why the intimidation? This proves my suspicions. Earth is concealing something significant about its military, something the Concord is not meant to know. With a decisive click of his mandibles, he added, and I'm going to find out what it is. Flix hesitated. How? If Krell couldn't uncover it? Krell relies on data, records, archives, intercepted transmissions, Zorax said, eyes narrowing. I'm going to use a more direct approach. The reception. Captain Nix of Earth's diplomatic security detail checked her watch for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. The Galactic Concord's grand reception was scheduled to start in half an hour, and Ambassador Tia Jackson was still in her suite, finalizing her notes for tomorrow's opening address. Anything suspicious? Asked Lieutenant Riley, scanning the reception hall. The massive chamber of the Grand Stellar Hotel was alive with movement. 27 species mingled in swirling patterns of sound, light, and scent. Nix smirked. Define suspicious. We've got guests who breathe methane, eat radiation, and change color when they speak. Everything is suspicious by human standards. Fair point, Riley said, scanning the crowd again. But I mean out of the ordinary. Security's tight. Zatulian guards are at the exits. The Vraxians are doing their usual dominance displays near the buffet. He lowered his voice. And Ambassador Zorax has been staring at us for 20 minutes. Nix's gaze shifted subtly toward the far corner, where the tall, insected diplomat stood, his 3 unblinking eyes fixed on them. That Zorax? Riley asked. The summit's chief organizer? The very same. Nix confirmed. And he's been asking questions about our delegation, specifically why we never bring military personnel. Riley frowned. That again? I thought we settled it years ago. Apparently not to his satisfaction. Nix said, straightening as Ambassador Jackson entered the hall. Heads up, boss is here. Keep an eye on Zorax. I don't like how interested he's suddenly gotten in our protocols. The first confrontation. From across the hall, Zorax studied the human security officers. They were professional. Well-positioned, alert, communicating constantly through discreet earpieces. But were they military? To his alien eyes, humans looked deceptively similar regardless of their differences in height, build, or coloration. Ambassador Zorax, a voice said warmly from behind him. He turned, masking his surprise, to find Tia Jackson herself standing there, radiant in a tailored blue suit adorned with small emblems representing Earth's nations. Her dark skin contrasted elegantly with silver jewelry at her neck and wrists. I hear you've been asking about our delegation, she said. Her tone was friendly, but her eyes were sharp, assessing. Zorax's spiracles tightened. How had she learned of his inquiries so quickly? Merely procedural questions, Ambassador. Ensuring that all summit protocols are observed. Of course, she said with a pleasant smile. Anything specific I can clarify? I wouldn't want misunderstandings before tomorrow's sessions. Zorax seized his opportunity. Actually, yes. I've noticed that Earth never sends military representatives to these gatherings. It's unusual. Ah, Jackson said with a light laugh. That question again. I sometimes forget how different our approach seems to our galactic colleagues. The truth is simple. In our system, the military operates under strict civilian oversight. Our diplomatic corps represents all aspects of our government, including defense policy. But every other species sends military officials. Zorax pressed. The Vraxians, the Zetulians, even the Lemurians. It's traditional. Expected. Jackson's smile didn't falter. Earth respects those traditions, but we have our own. Some might interpret your absence as an attempt to hide something, Zorax said, watching closely for a reaction. The human ambassador's expression remained calm, but something flickered in her eyes. That would be an unfortunate misunderstanding, Ambassador. Earth hides nothing. We are. She paused just a fraction too long. An open book. And in that moment Zorax knew she was lying. Agent Krell's warning. The ambassador's words hung in the air like a blade. For the first time that evening, Jackson's carefully practiced smile faltered. That's a serious accusation, Ambassador. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. Zorax replied smoothly, echoing Agent Krell's warning from earlier. I'm simply noting patterns. Asking questions? Isn't that what diplomacy is for, understanding each other more clearly? Indeed, Jackson said. Her voice had lost some of its warmth, replaced with a cooler precision. And in that spirit of understanding, let me be very clear. Earth's diplomatic practices are our own. We follow Concord protocols where they apply, and we maintain sovereignty where they do not. If you have concerns about the composition of our delegation, you're welcome to raise them formally at tomorrow's administrative session. Zorax's mandibles clicked softly. Perhaps I will. Wonderful, Jackson replied with professional detachment. Then I look forward to tomorrow's discussion. She inclined her head slightly. If you'll excuse me, I must greet the Zetulian delegation. Enjoy your evening, Ambassador. Zorax watched her depart, noting with sharp interest how her security details shifted instantly, reconfiguring their formation to shield her path across the room. Civilian guards, they claimed, but their efficiency, their synchronized awareness, the fluidity of their response, it all screamed military training. The mystery only deepened. And so did Zorax's determination. Tomorrow, he promised himself, he would force the issue publicly. Let Earth try to hide behind their words with 26 other species listening. Private concerns. Later that evening, Captain Nick stood at attention in Ambassador Jackson's suite. He's preparing to make a formal complaint about our lack of military representation, she reported. Jackson sighed, unclasping the silver jewelry at her neck and placing it into its velvet-lined case. I was afraid of that. He pressed me hard during the reception. Persistent, too persistent. What are your orders? Nix asked. Nothing, Jackson said after a pause. For now we wait. If he pushes tomorrow, we'll handle it as we always have. Her expression hardened. Protocol Sigma 9 remains in effect. No acknowledgement of military personnel, no discussion of defense capabilities beyond what's in the public briefings. Yes, Ambassador. And Nix, have Lieutenant Riley run a full sweep of our quarters. If Zorax is suddenly asking questions after 6 summits without issue, something has changed. I want to know what. Yes, ma'am. Nix hesitated at the door. Do you think he knows about the real reason? Jackson's face was unreadable. No one knows the real reason, Captain. And that's how it will stay. The summit floor. The following morning, the grand chamber of the summit pulsed with life. Representatives from 27 civilizations filled the tiered amphitheater, their seating tailored to wildly different physiologies. Methane breathers in sealed domes, silicon-based intelligences encased in crystal housings, sprawling multi-limbed colossi beside swarms of micro-collectives in containment suits. At the center, the summit circle gleamed, a neutral platform where voices carried equally to every delegate. The formalities concluded, the Lemurian High Speaker gave the welcome address, the roll call echoed across the chamber, ancient peace accords were richly acknowledged. Then came the words Zorax had been waiting for. We now open the floor for administrative matters before addressing the primary agenda, High Speaker Shimrong declared, their bioluminescence pulsing in ceremonial cadence. Zorax raised his speaking beacon. The chamber lights dimmed to spotlight him. The chair recognizes Ambassador Zorax of the Galactic Concord, Shimrong announced. Zorax moved to the summit circle, 6 legs arranged in a posture of formal respect. He felt every gaze upon him as he began. Honored delegates, I bring before this assembly a matter of procedural consistency. His words carried smoothly across the chamber. He laid out Earth's ongoing refusal to include military representation, presenting it not as accusation but as a breach of long-standing expectations. Yet even as he spoke, he saw Jackson watching him from across the chamber, her expression calm, her body language unshaken. Only her security team looked sharper than usual, alert, ready. Finally, Zorax delivered his demand. I formally request that Earth explain its consistent deviation, and either conform to summit tradition by including military representation or provide a compelling justification for exemption. A ripple of unease moved through the chamber. The Vraxian War Supreme rumbled with approval, while other delegations exchanged glances, intrigued by the challenge. High Speaker Shimrong pulsed a pattern of acknowledgement. The Assembly notes Ambassador Zorax's request. Ambassador Jackson of Earth, how do you respond? Jackson's counter. Jackson rose with unhurried grace, stepping into the circle. Her voice carried with practiced clarity. Honored delegates, Earth thanks Ambassador Zorax for his vigilance in safeguarding summit traditions. However, I must respectfully remind this body that while military representation is customary, it is not mandatory. The Summit Charter, Section 7, Paragraph 3, states clearly that delegations shall be composed according to each member's governmental structures and diplomatic traditions. Zorax's mandibles twitched. She was using the charter itself against him. Earth's tradition, Jackson continued, is that civilian leadership speaks for all domains of governance, including defense. This is not secrecy. It is not evasion. It is our way. Another ripple moved through the chamber, less certain this time. Delegates began checking their charter records. Then Jackson shifted tone, her words sharp as glass. And I must note, Earth has attended 6 summits without this matter ever being raised. Why, after all this time, is it suddenly a concern? What has changed? Her eyes locked with Zorax's, piercing. He felt heat crawl beneath his carapace. Ambassador Zorax, asked High Speaker Shimrong, their patterns flickering with inquiry. Do you wish to reply? Zorax faltered. He had meant to place Earth on the defensive. Instead, he found himself questioned by the entire chamber. I merely seek consistency, he said, voice tight. Every other species brings military officers. Why should Earth be different? Perhaps, Jackson said smoothly. The question is not why Earth is different, but why every other species is the same. The chamber fell into heavy silence. These are peace summits, Jackson pressed. And yet we surround ourselves with military banners, as though expecting war. Earth chooses differently, civilian presence, civilian authority. Is that truly so threatening? Murmurs spread. Attention shifted from Zorax to Jackson. He felt his grip on the moment slipping. I withdraw my complaint, he said stiffly. Earth may continue its traditions. Thank you, Ambassador, Jackson replied with a gracious nod. Earth appreciates your understanding. The midnight visit. That night, Zorax tossed in his hibernation pod, Jackson's words echoing in his thoughts. Perhaps the question is not why Earth is different, but why A chime interrupted his restless thoughts. Identify, he called. Lieutenant Riley, Earth Diplomatic Security, came the calm reply. Zorax froze. Why was a human security officer at his door at this hour? Had his questions gone too far? With a reluctant click of his mandibles, he unlocked the door. Enter. A tall human male stepped inside. His movements were controlled, efficient, the movements of a predator conserving energy until the strike. His face was calm, unreadable. Ambassador Zorax, Riley said quietly, his tone even but carrying weight. Forgive the late hour. But this matter cannot wait until morning. Zorax's limbs shifted into a subtle defensive stance. What matter? Riley allowed himself a small pause before replying. Ambassador Jackson would like to speak with you. Privately. The private meeting. The corridor outside Zorax's quarters was unusually quiet when the chimes sounded. Identify, he called. Lieutenant Riley, Earth Diplomatic Security, came the calm reply. Zorax's antennae twitched. At this hour? Yes, sir, Riley said, his tone neutral but edged with purpose. Ambassador Jackson requests a private audience regarding your questions from today's session. She believes the discussion would be better conducted away from the summit's attentive ears. And if I decline? Zorax asked, his voice cool. Then you return to your quarters, and nothing changes, Riley replied simply. This isn't a demand. It's an invitation. One that might answer some of your questions. Curiosity wrestled with caution in Zorax's mind. This could be a trap, or the revelation he had been chasing. Give me a moment to prepare, he said finally. I'll wait outside, Riley replied. 5 minutes later, Zorax followed the human through the dim, winding corridors of the summit complex. Most delegates were deep in their rest cycles. The silence felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were listening. Riley moved with deliberate precision, scanning corners, pausing before intersections, waiting for automated patrol drones to pass. Your security seems thorough, Zorax observed. Standard procedure, Riley said without elaboration. For civilian security personnel? Zorax pressed. Riley allowed the faintest smile. For anyone tasked with protecting diplomats, Ambassador. They reached the section assigned to the Earth delegation. Instead of Jackson's private suite, Riley guided Zorax into a small conference room. The doors slid open without a sound. Inside, Jackson sat at a round table, a slim datapad before her. Captain Nick stood by the window, posture relaxed but alert. Ambassador Zorax, Jackson greeted him, gesturing to a seat adapted for his physiology. Thank you for coming at this unusual hour. Your invitation was intriguing, Zorax said, folding his 6 limbs neatly. Though the lights dimmed slightly. A privacy field, she explained. Nothing said here will leave these walls. Zorax's spiracles tightened. So there is something to hide. Not hide, Jackson corrected. Protect. She leaned forward, her tone sharpening. You've been pressing, persistently and publicly, about Earth's lack of military presence at these summits. That has drawn attention. From whom? From everyone, Jackson said. Including those whose attention you may not want. Is that a threat? No, she said, her gaze steady. A warning. And perhaps an opportunity. You want to understand. Very well, you will. But understand this as well. Once you know, you cannot unknow. Zorax tilted his head. Then tell me. Jackson exchanged a glance with Nyx, who gave a subtle nod. You've heard the official explanation: civilian oversight, diplomatic tradition. That's true, but incomplete. I suspected as much, Zorax said, his mandibles clicking softly. The complete answer, Jackson continued, is more complicated and dangerous to discuss openly. Your persistence has forced my hand. She tapped the datapad again, projecting a holographic image of the summit complex. The display highlighted species-specific accommodations: the Vraxians' armored corridors, the Lumrians' atmospheric domes, the Kritha's isolation from electromagnetic interference. These are adjustments for biological and cultural needs, Jackson said. Every species gets them. Now, tell me, Ambassador, what special accommodations have ever been made for humans? Zorax hesitated. None that I recall. Humans are adaptable. You eat most common provisions, tolerate standard atmospheric mixes, and survive in broad temperature ranges. Exactly, Jackson said, her smile changing, less diplomatic, more predatory. We're seen as needing nothing special. And that is the first mistake most species make about us. Zorax's antennae shifted uneasily. I fail to see how this connects to your military absence. Jackson's gaze locked with his. Because if Earth brought its military here, Ambassador, there would be no peace summits. Zorax stared at her. You claim your forces are so dangerous that their mere presence would destabilize diplomacy? Nix chuckled. Not dangerous in the way you think. Jackson leaned back. Tell me, what's the real secondary purpose of bringing military personnel to these summits? Zorax considered. Beyond security? Posturing. Status signaling. Exactly, Jackson said. Strength is measured. Hierarchies are quietly reinforced. Every species plays this game. She tapped again, switching the display to neural scans labeled by species. These are baseline profiles. Now, she toggled the display. These are the same subjects during threat assessment. Zorax leaned in, watching the patterns flare and shift. Then his eyes narrowed. The human scans, they match the Vraxians, the Zetulians, the Goral. The three most aggressive military powers in the Concord. And yet, Jackson said softly, our interstellar presence is minimal. Our wars, mostly internal. Why? Because, Nick said, her voice quiet but edged with steel. We learned to turn it inward. To channel it. Jackson's tone grew colder. Human military personnel aren't just trained, they're refined. Our threat assessment instincts are already apex level. Training amplifies them. Put a human officer in a room with your generals, and within minutes they will know everything, your weaknesses, your patterns, your tells. And they will never unsee them. Zorax sat back, the truth dawning. This wasn't about avoiding intimidation. It was about avoiding revelation. You fear what they would learn, he said. Jackson's smile returned, this time without warmth. No, Ambassador. We fear what you would do with it once they did. Hidden strength. Jackson's voice was steady, but there was weight behind every word. A human military officer, standing in the same room as the Vraxian War Supreme, would identify at least 17 ways to incapacitate them, automatically. Not out of malice. Not even out of conscious choice. It's instinct, honed by thousands of years of survival and sharpened through training. Zorax's antennae twitched in disbelief. And other military leaders could see this? Without question. Riley answered from near the door. Commanders are trained to read intent in body language, posture, and micro-expressions. The Vraxian leader would sense the human. Zorax's mandibles clicked softly. So the civilian oversight explanation you give the Concord is a convenient truth. Jackson gave a small smile. Convenient, yes. True, technically. But the deeper reality is this: our absence of military representatives is an accommodation, for everyone's benefit. A peace summit with human military present, Riley said bluntly, wouldn't stay peaceful. That's why, Jackson continued, we send trained diplomats, cultural specialists, and security officers whose skills focus on protection, not exploitation of weakness. Our people are trained to read the room without destabilizing it. Zorax's voice lowered. And this has been your practice at all 6 summits? Since the first, Jackson confirmed. That meeting between Earth's Joint Chiefs and the Vraxian War Command almost ended in bloodshed. Both sides left convinced the other was preparing for war. We learned our lesson. Nyx's voice softened. It's better this way. For everyone. Zorax leaned back, the implications rearranging his perspective. And my inquiries into Agent Krell? The surveillance? Standard protocol, Jackson said evenly. You were asking questions that could expose this truth. Krell was discouraged from pursuing it further. There are powers in the Concord who would exploit this, either against Earth or against their rivals, by manufacturing confrontations. Zorax exhaled slowly. So your deviation from protocol is actually another kind of protocol. Jackson inclined her head. One designed to maintain peace, not just discuss it. This is not what I expected, Zorax admitted. The truth rarely is, Jackson replied. Which is why we needed this privacy. And now? Zorax asked. Do you expect me to remain silent? What happens now is up to you, Jackson said. We've trusted you with the truth because you strike me as someone who values understanding over appearances. What you do with that is your choice. He was quiet for several moments. I have one more question. If humans are naturally predisposed to this threat-focused perception, why aren't your civilian diplomats just as dangerous? Jackson's lips curved faintly. Specialization. Military training pushes those instincts to an extreme. Our diplomats are trained in empathy, de-escalation, and collaboration. The instinct is still there, but redirected. We are not unarmed, Ambassador. We are differently armed. Zorax rose, decision made. Then I will withdraw my inquiries, permanently. And I will ensure this discussion leaves no trace in the Concord archives. Thank you, Jackson said, rising with him. Not understanding, Zorax corrected. Wisdom. There's a difference between knowing the rules and knowing when to set them aside. As Riley escorted him back through the quiet corridors, Zorax found himself noticing details he'd overlooked before. The strategic positioning of delegation quarters, the staggered timing of receptions, the calculated avoidance of certain species' paths crossing. Humans, he realized, played a subtle role in this choreography. Not by projecting strength, but by concealing it. Sometimes the most stabilizing presence in a volatile room was the one that did not announce itself as dangerous. Back in his quarters, he sent instructions to cancel all pending inquiries into Earth's delegation. Then he drafted the withdrawal of his procedural complaint. Lying in his hibernation pod, his mind turned over the thought again and again. How many other species in the Concord hid similar truths behind polite tradition? How much of peace was an elaborate illusion, maintained only by careful, mutual restraint? Departure. 8 days later, the summit concluded. By every measure, the most productive in Concord history. As delegates prepared to leave, Zorax stood beside Jackson in the main hangar, watching vessels depart. A productive week, he said. Very, she agreed. The Deep Space Monitoring Network will help everyone. Zorax hesitated, then glanced toward Nyx, who was supervising the loading of Earth's equipment. Your security captain. Her skills seem unusually refined for a civilian. Jackson's expression didn't change. Captain Nyx has extensive experience in diplomatic protection, but no military background. You know we don't bring military to summits. Of course, Zorax said, the faint chitter of his mandibles resembling a grin. How could I forget? He watched Nyx for a moment longer. Her stance, her constant scanning of the hangar, the way she positioned herself with tactical precision. Just civilian security, they claimed. Perhaps that was true. Or perhaps, with humans, the lines between civilian and military were more blurred than anyone admitted. Either way, Zorax knew this much: he would never again underestimate the quiet power of Earth's delegation, nor the wisdom of keeping that power hidden.